to this computer. Hello!
Hello, and this is Phil.
And this is Phil!
And this is the Phil and Phil Show.
It's been a little
Hey.
two-week hiatus while I was up in Michigan, staying on Lake Huron. I don't know how they call them lakes. I started calling it an ocean. They're so big. Those lakes are huge. So, it's like these massive, vast expanses of water.
So yeah, it's great to be back. And as you can see in England, we've hit the winter. It's cold. Phil's still in the sun. And tonight we've got a very special guest. I'm really honoured and privileged that my really great friend and teacher, Richard Cratemore, is joining us on our show tonight. Richard's one of the world leading geomancers and water dowsers. He does water dowsing in the UK. So any second now I'm going to let him, well, I can let Richard on now while I'm talking about him. So you can unmute now, Richard, then.
Hey.
Hey, brilliant.
Good evening, Phil. Good evening, Phil.
Yeah. Good
Hello,
evening.
Richard.
So, Richard,
good to meet you.
This is my friend Phil. He was running the course when I trained in Arizona at the Tree of Life Rejuvenation Centre. And Richard was my geomancy teacher along with his wife, Julie. And, well, Richard and I have been friends actually before I did the geomancy training. Yeah, it's become a great friend of mine. Got a lot of respect for Richard and the work he's done. He's trained in geomancy, feng shui. He's one of the leading water dowsers. He does feng shui consultancy actually all over the world. And tonight he's going to talk to us. I know, Richard, I know Phil's like a little kid. He's so excited about geomancy. And I said, right, we'll get Richard on. And I had a friend of mine, I sent him an email, Richard, a while ago. And at the end of my little tagline, it's got health and lifestyle coach in geomancer. And he replied, what the fuck is a geomancer? So maybe Richard can actually answer that question properly for us.
Okay, happy to. Well, geomancy means divining the earth. So we could define geomancy as subtle geography. In fact, there was a feng shui tradition that you study geography for 10 years and then feng shui for 4 years, and then you start off and practice. So it's kind of, geomancy is an evolution on from geography. It's an easy place to start. It includes a spectrum of skills from curative design work, as you'd know in feng shui, landscape design or interior design or architectural design work, through to curative cleaning up earth energies that have got distressed, which can be really important for health, through to the end of designing sacred spaces and finding the right earth energy spots to put these sacred spaces on, whether you're talking about a labyrinth or a stone circle or a Gothic cathedral or a medicine wheel. So yeah, it encompasses a whole range of earth skills, very much rooted in the earth energies, the sweet spots on earth, and the power spots on earth. It's fairly obvious to think that every church in Britain is sited on a traditional sacred site that was probably used as a special site, a sacred site for centuries or millennia before the churches got built. We've always been aware of sweet spots where we feel good, where we feel whole, where we feel energized. The Zen garden tradition, this is the origin of the garden, actually a little special spot that we've put a fence around to stop people camping inside of it, so people don't trash it with the speckled space. We find geomancy as practices in different cultures around the world, dating back to, well, really the Paleolithic. The Australian Aborigines have a well-evolved system of geomancy that involves honouring the local power spots and keeping them clean with meditation and ceremonial practice, and also the lines that connect the power spots across country. So we're getting into the realms in Mesolithic Australia, of the song lines. A little bit later on in history, in the Roman period, we find Romans were very keen on straight lines. And before them, the Celts also created grid patterns across the Gallic countries to cite their towns as well as their temples. We've got a vast body of geomancy in the Hindu tradition, in Vastu, which is all about sighting in relation to earth energies and in relation to climate and weather, local weather, for optimum health and optimum good fortune in the home. This theme was picked up later in the Chinese, or a similar period, the Chinese feng shui tradition. If you imagine the kind of fundamentals of life and protection, imagine Stone Age man seeking out to sleep through the night, because a cave represents safety, represents a solid wall behind your back. And the view out across from the cave down the valley should be a bountiful valley full of game that you can hunt, to the water that you can drink. And this kind of Paleolithic vision of what might constitute a safe home is really the foundation of all feng shui placement. This idea of being protected at the back and having abundance in front, and your sides well protected as well. So that's a very fundamental geomantic model. If we come through to Britain, the sighting of stone circles, the sighting of chain of cairns before then, very much always set out on earth energy power spots. So that's a little glimpse of some of the spectrum of geomancy. We can also go on to include disciplines like sacred geometry and sacred metrology, when we're looking at the exact dimensions and proportions with which we design temples and churches and cathedrals and mosques, and no doubt synagogues too, let alone stone circles. And we also got the realms of astronomy and its related discipline of astrology, in as much as astronomical alignment figures very strongly in the sighting of sacred sites and design of sacred sites. So we have several realms really that geomancy covers. The heavenly end, we've got geometry, we've got numerology, we've got metrology. In the middle region, we've got that which is functional for humans to live in. And that doors are the high enough for us to get through without hitting our head with simple geomancy. Getting it right is what geomancy is about, really, getting it right into the subtleties. And the third realm, the lower realm, the realm of the earth energies, whether we're talking song lines or ley lines or underground water veins or geological faults or some of the other geological features that can all make a difference to the health of life on the surface directly above the underground water veins or directly in the path of the ley line. Geomancy in a nutshell, the three realms, and it's the human's job, as it's the shaman's job traditionally, to harmonize earth and heaven and come to a happy alignment in between the two. So that the heavens can be reflected in the earth, traditional adage. Okay, that's enough rant now. Ask me another question.
So which area do you find yourself using the most, Richard?
I work with earth acupuncture. It was my prime discipline, really. So a simple example, an awful lot of the geomancy work I do involves going to people's homes and with my dowsing rods and checking around their home for the presence of any geopathic stress lines, particularly running under the bed or running under the front door or running under the center point of the house, are very key areas to check. Now we can have underground water veins that are registering distress in their energy information fields, known in feng shui as Sha streams, or they used to be known in European dowsing as black streams. They're illness-carrying streams. And this is effectively an underground water vein that has registered landscape trauma somewhere along its length. And where you get trauma, you get stagnation. And when you get stagnation of flow, you get the accumulation of toxins. Some of them fairly physical, like radon gas, can accumulate along the path of the shower stream. Some of them might be subtler psychic toxins, or the pain of the elemental life in the local landscape as a result of that landscape trauma. And I'm talking particularly things like wherever the bulldozers go, really, quarries and mines and tunnels and cuttings, building foundations. These are all from digging out lakes, big roadworks. These can generate stress or trauma in the landscape, stagnation of flow along the energy flow of the underground water veins. And then you've got a shower stream that can be a bit mild, and if they sleep over one of these at night, you might just get slightly disturbed sleep, bad dreams. Or if you sleep over a stronger one, you might find yourself finding reasons to avoid going to bed, or have insomnia, not be able to settle deeply to sleep. Through to the other end of the spectrum, if you've got a pair of shower streams that are strongly negative, strongly distressed, crossing under your bed, then you're going to throw up some serious illness. It impacts seriously on the immune system. In acupuncture terms, we find the 3 heater meridian gets hit first, and then the spleen meridian often. In terms of Western medicine, the immune system and the endocrine system are particularly quickly, easily first affected. There is an old saying among dowsers that no tumours ever grow in any person or any animal for that matter, unless they're sited over a crossing of a pair of negative underground streams, the shower streams. I've probably, in the 40 years I've been working in this field, I'd say that's about 98% right. Very strongly in all the dowsing literature you ever look at, the development growth of tumours, the associated depleted immune system state, very, very strongly related to sleeping over distressed underground earth energies, which when we sleep at night, and if we're lucky we get to spend a third of our lives in bed sleeping, resting, regenerating, it's important that we're regenerating over clean earth energies, otherwise we don't rest, we don't restore properly. And we're a little bit more wiped out every day. So one common symptom of people sleeping over geopathic stress is they say they wake feeling unrefreshed in the morning. So that's kind of my prime focus, a lot of medical earth acupuncture to clean up the earth energies that have been disturbed under people's homes, under people's beds particularly. I do this with a style of earth acupuncture that involves, well, first of all, identifying where the streams are running and where they are distressed, and then finding a suitable point, which is usually a point out on the lawn in the garden, to perform earth acupuncture, which is basically a giant version of acupuncture for humans. I use a set of wooden wands, about 2 or 3 foot long, probably a couple of foot long mainly. That I use as acupuncture needles in exactly the same way as I'd use them with people.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Richard, you are a qualified acupuncturist as well for people, aren't you?
Yeah. I spend half the week working in clinic.
So these are energy streams, not like water, or they could be water, right? So these are energy streams or energy flow. So what's causing these disturbances? Are some of them natural, or some of them man-caused? What's causing these disturbances?
Yeah, in the case of underground streams, the underground stream is potentially neutral or clean and happy and healthy. And even though the stream itself might be 300 foot down, there's a direct vertical energy field or energy and information field rising to the Earth's surface and above. Baron von Pohl, a Bavarian dowser, famously went up on a hot air balloon in the late 1920s and found that he could still douse the shower stream crossings at 1.5 kilometers high. So a clear vertical plane. And so anything along that vertical plane that gets disturbed, like most obviously where the bulldozers go in order to do major landscaping, that sets up trauma, that sets up shock, and that's readable in the information field of the underground water veins. And so this is what a lot of dowsers working in geopathic stress realm have as one, if not the primary focus, or one of the one of the main primary focuses, just the quality of energy in the underground water veins as it passes under buildings and people. There are a whole bunch of other things that one needs to look for in cleaning up the earth energies of home. Lays are another feature. They typically have a more like a double helix, a central spirit midline, and a pair of masculine and feminine currents winding around them, like the serpents around a caduceus. And they also travel longer distances. They can pick up trauma from a couple hundred miles away. Something bad's gone down the north of England, and if the lay then runs through your home in the south of England, you will pick up on the disturbance. It's a subtle thing. It's something that obviously people who are in some degree of mental illness can be very hypersensitive to. One of my maxims is, if your child complains of monsters under the bed, there's probably monsters under the bed. in the sense of negative information in the earth energies running under the bed.
Oh, wow.
And we can also, we can look in a fairly clinical acupuncturist way at the quality of flow of the energy along the underground water vein and the lays. But we also need to open to the realms of other spirits that inhabit this planet with us. And so part of the pain in the landscape that one can experience at a particular site will be held by the earth elementals, or the earth, water and air elementals, the nature spirits. And so we can have dislocated nature spirits, we can have traumatized nature spirits, we can have angry or mischievous nature spirits. I did some work on a road quite a few years ago now that famously has the ghost of a coach and 8 being seen going off the road, and a very high death toll of accidents in current decades, motor cars just mysteriously going off this road at this point where there's coach and 8 seen off the road. And going to see what was going on there, I discovered there was a very, very angry landscape diva, landscape angel really, of that valley, whose shoulder had been severed by the cutting of a railway line through it a couple of hundred years ago. It was totally pissed off with humans still, really. So then we're getting into the more shamanic realms of offerings and pleas for forgiveness and negotiations of trying to live in peaceful cooperation with the elemental spirits of the place.
So were you able to correct that energy?
Usually, not always.
Not always.
Not always, or one can improve it. Sometimes stuff doesn't clear completely. To come back to your question earlier, sometimes to an extent that it's natural. You'll find the flow of energies in a swamp and swampland are quite sluggish. The flow of thoughts of the people living there correspondingly sluggish, probably, compared with the sharp minds of people living on top of the mountain. So just another example of the subtleties of geomancy, just looking at the quality of human life and different cultures that might happen up in the mountain or down at the seaside or in the big town on the river. But to a large extent, most of the geopathic stress work that I've been involved with has been either the digging of the canals or the digging of the railways or the digging of building foundations and quarries and mines and tunnels and those sorts of things.
Richard, for people,
So quite a lot of the work is really apologise to the elemental realms on behalf of humanity.
for people that don't know what geomancy is, Richard, could you just explain that for us? Sorry, not
geomancy, divining the earth.
Geopathic stress, sorry.
Geopathic stress. Okay, so geopathic stress is a term that's been coined to describe the realms of environmental medicine, if you like. So we can talk about a human picking up geopathic stress, in other words, stress on their bodies, stress on their beings, from the environment in which they're living or working or sleeping. Most obviously the earth energies, but sometimes other subtler interior design features can also stress people. And also geopathic stress, we can just apply it to the Earth. Geo is from gay in the Greek, Mother Earth, and pathos is disease or suffering. Geopathic stress is suffering of the Earth. We find it's not just humans that get hurt. Any mammal living over a geopathic stress line is going to have its health depleted in some respect. The good news is that most of these things can be cleaned up using earth acupuncture and remote viewing and psychic healing skills. There are a good number of geomancers working, to my knowledge, in Britain and North America and some countries in Europe, using some style of earth acupuncture to clean up negative energy lines as they've been found in a particular environment. There's a whole other range of less curative work that can be hugely helpful to people just by moving the bed off the line and seeing how people's health picks up.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's geopathic stress. It can come from underground streams, it can come from geological faults, which are associated with fast-growing inflammations and tumours and manic behaviour. And also on the positive side, associated, I suppose one could say, with the enormous amounts of glamour that the San Andreas fault has managed to give Los Angeles and Hollywood in terms of the world's view. That's a thesis in process, that one.
Right.
Yeah.
So
if you think of that,
yeah, go ahead.
if you think of the power spots on Earth that are particularly important to us culturally at the moment, we can think of places like the Kaaba in Mecca, the Pentagon, perhaps, British Houses of Parliament, as well as places like Stonehenge and Machu Picchu. A little local stone circle or medicine wheel somewhere.
Yeah, Phil and I, my parents live up in Renwick in Cumbria, in the Eden Valley, and Phil came up and we went to a little stone circle there, and it was just really magical. It was just so simple, but the energy felt amazing in this little stone circle, just in the middle of a field. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I could expand the notions of geomancy on into sacred space and the traditional connection between sacred space and connecting with ancestors, which is so whether we're looking at a Neolithic chambered can or a stone circle or a Native American kiva, or there's always a level of ancestral connection when we're doing sacred work. Yeah, and churches and graveyards, the same. There are our ancestors buried in the churchyards. So there's something in there, there's something in the rock and the stone that becomes embedded. There's a nice notion in Feng Shui called predecessor qi, which basically means the energy of the site, that which has happened on that site, is going to inform future events on that site. So a kitchen where everyone always rows and ends up divorcing is likely to set up a recurring pattern for any new inhabitants in that house and find themselves arguing in that kitchen unless some kind of space clearing can be attained. So a realm of geomancy is space clearing with smudging, with incense, with bells, with intent, with clapping, with music, applied with geomantic intent. These are also styles of geomancy beyond the earth acupuncture, just as toning, devotional chanting, meditating, oming, overtoning, all these can be used with space clearing intent, and that's geomancy. That's an aspect of geomancy. Or you can, and sometimes just by doing it that way, it's hard work, and I like earth acupuncture because you get better leverage, but you can clear a whole nasty, distressed underground stream just by playing the right music at it with the right intention, having attuned to the underground energies first. And while we're talking about attunement, many cultures in the world have got some kind of, not quite anthropomorphizing, but certainly a sense of naming and giving visuals to the spirits of the underground earth energies. So we found recurring themes of underground water dragons or underground serpents in different cultures the world over as a personification of some of these telluric currents. Lays, again, are very often represented as dragons or serpents. Lays have a more overground dimension to them, where the underground water vents are very much rising from below. It's really important stuff. There's the Chinese ideogram for the word sha, which is hostile environmental influence in all its ramifications, whether that's a dirty lay running through your room or whether it's a neighbour's ornamental cannon pointing at your front door. These will all be described as hostile environmental influences. Sha is the word, and the ideogram as it's written, the roots of hostile environment come from 4 rays of fire that rise from below the Earth's surface. There's the lower character, and the upper character is slaying, decapitation, killing. So killing chi rising from beneath the Earth's surface is the root translation of sha, which is the feng shui term that's become widely popularized to represent any hostile environmental influence that could be impacting on health or happiness or social harmony, as well as little neighborhood specifics like accident black spots or derelict buildings that just go bad and no one's got the energy to make. There's a good reason for that.
Any more questions, Phil?
No, it's fascinating. I just like, and it just, explains why, somebody we can do in the best diet possible and still not being healthy because there's, stress in their environment or they're living in an unhealthy location. So we know that like cities today are not built in alignment with these principles. So cities are very unhealthy environments to live in general, especially city centers. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I can think particularly of London, where not only have you got all the stress of a huge city, but you've also got underground railways, underground tunnels all over the place. And these are all electrified, carrying trains.
Right.
So you've got electro-smog. As electro-smog becomes one of the big components of the total weight of geopathic stress within every single water line running through the city, every single lay, potentially. It is really important stuff. I and plenty of colleagues have been spending our lives trying to get the importance of geopathic stress more widely understood as one of the foundations of medicine. It used to be understood in cultures much more than it is in the last couple of 100 years. Excuse me.
Yeah, cities like London and New York with these underground railways, and then long histories of different cultures there that have kind of maybe hijacked these positive energies for their advantage. I would say so. Especially in London, the city of London proper is not necessarily the best place.
No. So you reminded me that there is also a long history of using geomancy to stay in power. Hitler was very interested in it. Chairman Mao used it very obviously while forbidding it of the common folk. And we find lays typically run not just connecting sacred sites, but also centres of power in contemporary culture, whether they're the local town hall or the Houses of Parliament, or whether it's the chieftain's hut in Neolithic Orkney, or whether it's nuclear power stations for that matter. Lays have a relationship with power. And yeah, the old chicken and egg argument about how much of this is secret knowledge that's been kept alive within traditional shamanic tribal culture, or in modern times within Masonic culture or Druid culture, or the covens that perhaps contain senior Tory politicians and police chiefs and so on. The conspiracy theories are all about. Yeah, so there's political realms of geomancy. One can get in underneath your local town hall clean up the earth energies, find half the planning committee sacked for corruption mysteriously suddenly 6 weeks later because the earth acupuncture that's happened has revealed that which has been hidden. There's a Gaelic expression, Ishka Fui Halav, which literally means there's hidden waters underground, metaphorically means the secret behind the scenes agendas at work. And so I and colleagues have repeated experiences of cleaning up the earth energies of an area and then hearing a few days or weeks or months later, suddenly a massive corruption scandal exposed or a paedophile ring exposed or a terrorist cell exposed. Yeah, it does have an ability to bring stuff up to the light that's been hidden. There's a political dimension to it, there's the medical dimension to it. Any cancer patient in Austria now, no cancer patient is sent home from hospital without having a bed checked by Dowser. And usually the bed moved. It's taken seriously in Austria and German medicine, increasingly in places like Norway and Iceland as well. We're a little bit lagging behind here. Certainly in terms of our medical understanding, yeah, and I've seen plenty of people who've done everything else in terms of the right medicine, nutrition, and so on to solve their tumours or solve their health problems. And so often the big shift that they need is to get the earth energies cleaned up, and then they really do get better. So clinically, all those patients don't get better as I would expect them to. It's an automatic cue to check the earth energies at their homes at some point. It's no point having a really good acupuncture treatment, craniosacral treatment, or good homeopathic remedy or whatever, if you're bathing in energies that are depleting you all the time.
Yeah.
So it is important stuff. And I've seen again and again, I can think of so many stories of maybe the children's tent at an early Earth Spirit Festival, where the first day the kids' tent was up, they spent their entire time hitting each other and crying. And eventually we did some earth acupuncture at the end of the first day. So just clean up the earth energies that were running under the kids' tent. And the following day it was all shanty and peaceful, and it worked. So something as simple as that. It would have been even cleverer to have sited the marquee not over the geopathic stress hotspot, but 20 yards up the field where it was okay in the first place. So we can do, you know, siting work and curative work. Potential there. I was talking about predestination earlier. There's a very famous example. I mean, I can think of all sorts of places. There's one street, one side of a street in Eastbourne where no marriage ever lasts longer than 2 years, is the local tradition. And that was just on a really foul lay, running down that side of the street. But the most famous example in Britain is there was an area of low-lying marshland in medieval times in London that was the haunt of all the thieves and crooks and general lowlife in London at the time. And then in the 1700s, those marshes got drained and built up, and the Palace of Westminster was built just there, i.e. the Houses of Parliament. So the Houses of Parliament is running with a certain amount of predecessor of what was running under there before.
No surprise.
Wasn't there a story about somewhere like that as well, Richard?
Story about what? Sorry, I missed that.
10 Downing Street, I think. Wasn't that built on a site where they used to do cockfighting and gambling?
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, I heard,
kind of makes sense.
Yeah, something about that. I can't remember the whole story.
No, I hadn't heard that one. So yeah, predecessorship. Think about it. If you renovate an old church and convert it into a home, then presumably it's been deconsecrated, but there's going to be some kind of holy earth energy line running through the place still, which is going to give you a sweet and clean existence when you're living there. If the lay is running clean, but if the lay is running dirty, then you can have all sorts of psychospiritual disturbances, psychoemotional disturbances happening in the life of the home. So
regarding the ley line, Richard, is that a place that you really want to be living over? If you had a choice of building your house, would you want to build it on a ley line or would you want to build it off the ley line?
Well, the big lays, it's traditional to not live on the lay. the lay runs through the church and the vicarage is off to one side.
Yeah.
So lays are great for spiritual practice, was the old way of looking at it, but less comfortable for a secular life because they're a thoroughfare for all manner of spirits to pass through. Good high order spirits, as well as local landscape trapped ghosts, as well as other spirits as well. But in modern times, houses are built on lays all over the place, and sometimes a procession of monks going through one child's bedroom. I've never been able to shift a procession of monks that travel on one lay through a local home. They say, leave us alone, we're doing our job.
It's interesting you say that, Richard, because where my girlfriend Kay grew up, they had a monk that often used to come through their house, and they also had Lady Rosalind. So we used to go through their house as well and go and visit. So Kay was quite often frequented by ghosts in her room.
Yeah, no, well, where you got trap ghosts in the house, it seems to be always a combination of a lay running not quite clean, running a bit distressed, and a stack up of stagnant underground water veins as well. It's as if the energetic fabric of the shachi, the toxic energy that's given off by stagnant underground water veins, provides a kind of substratum or matrix that earthbound spirits, earthbound ghosts can feed off and not pass over properly, stay earthbound. So the best way to clear ghosts out of a house is to clean up the underground water veins so that substratum's gone, and then clean up the lay as well. The lay will still be a thoroughfare for spirits, but if the lay is running clean, because you've done some ceremony purification work, that could be done with a wooden wand and an acupuncture needle, it could be done with incense or a more formal ceremony. If you can clean that up, then you should have no more ghosts in. But just to march in, as I learned the hard way early on, to march in somewhere and send all the ghosts packing without cleaning up the earth energies, you just get a new crop of ghosts in the following weekend, potentially.
So what, can you describe a ley line? What is a ley line?
Okay, a ley line, if you think of the human acupuncture system, we've got main meridians, and we've got the 8 extraordinary deep meridians, and we've got secondary and tertiary meridians, right down to the tiny little skin capillary meridians, that one of which would nourish each hair follicle. So we've got a kind of nested hierarchy of strands of energy running through us that control all our the next octave down of our physical physiology. That's the acupuncture model. And the earth has just the same. So the lays correspond with the main meridians. And they're very much tied up, it seems, there's a link with human consciousness and lays particularly. We like to put our spiritual ceremonial sites on lays. We benefit from the energy of a good lay, and we feed back into that lay to raise vibration of consciousness. So there was an old vision right at the start of Glastonbury Festival back in the 70s, where the pyramid stage was sited on Worthy Farm to key into the ley lines to raise consciousness. And the notion, it was quite conscious at the time, the various traditional shamanic methods of raising consciousness, whether we're talking music, dance, entheogenic herbs, ceremony, sweat lodges for that matter, all the different ways of raising consciousness. The idea of putting them together in a festival and putting them on a lay or crossing of lays would enhance that, would raise consciousness further. And you set a field, set an edge to that, and you're starting to set a magic circle around that effectively, and you're starting to accumulate energy. You can raise more and more consciousness. And again, part of that vision of Glastonbury was to send that raised consciousness, not just enjoy it and work with it ourselves while we're at the festival, but then to send it back through the national grid of lays to the rest of the nation and ultimately the rest of the world in order to raise consciousness elsewhere. So this is practical geomancy, if you like, raise some energy, send it out to the grid, cast it as a blessing out to the nation. And the extent to which Glastonbury values, as we might call them, green values, anti-war values, have really, from those early days in the 1970s of Glastonbury, they're really mainstreaming, certainly in British culture now. There's an extent to which we could say, yeah, well, that's worked. It's a bit of active geomancy that has worked. Consciousness is shifting. There's a lot more compassion. There's a lot more anti-racism. There's a lot more compassion for animal welfare. There's a lot more of all sorts of good stuff. Festivals are consciously shamanic and ceremonial, and there's a sacred hearth that's kept clean in the centre, and the various talks and workshops and dance workshops and music and so on is doing the same thing and feeding back into the local lay grid or the national lay grid or the international lay grid. This is one way of doing it, but there are all sorts of other quiet groups of healers that are focusing on a focal point in their local community to cleanse the energy there. And in a sense, this is what every parish church should be doing. It's been partly part of its design, is to act as a station communicating heaven and earth, harmonizing heaven and earth, keeping the earth energies clean, keeping the local heavenly energies coming down the church steeple through to earth, so that there's some heavenly consciousness creeping in rather than just earthbound consciousness. But at the same time, we don't want to forget the underground earth consciousness, the realms of the gnomes, the realms of the subterranean dragons. They're also powerful and important and part of the fabric of reality. So to work as a geomancer, to work as a dowser, dowsing in a sense just amplifying the intuition, using dowsing tools perhaps to aid focus and aid the process of working with the intuition, through to allied modalities like psychic skills, spiritual skills, telepathic communication with the fairies at the bottom of the garden, which is something that a lot of children know. Adults tend to have been weaned off the ability to chat with the fairies, but you need this as a skill to sometimes to work in geomancy in order to get some harmony restored to a piece of landscape. And I'd like to tell you a little story that's just popped into my head about there's a tunnel that was when they were building the Brighton bypass about 20 years ago now. There's a tunnel through a chalk hill called the Southwick Hill Tunnel. It's got a nice swoop and a contour to it, and it's not dead straight. The first time I drove through it, I just tuned in to see how the geopathic stress there was, because there's another one not far away that's extremely nasty, an older tunnel, and there was no geopathic stress in this brand new tunnel. I drove through it the week after it had opened, apart from a tiny little band at the southern portal, but it was almost entirely sweet and clean. And I was slightly baffled by this. This is unusual in my experience. I just happened to mention this in a little talk I was doing at an Earth Spirit Festival a few months later. This guy at the back puts his hand up and said, "That's really interesting you say that. Can I introduce myself? My name's Jeff. I'm the civil engineer in charge of that section of the A27 upgrade. And I need to tell you this story now. We're having double of a job. The machines were forever breaking. My men were forever getting injured. Nothing would go right. And so one evening on the day that we first connected the two halves of the tunnel, I sent, after the men had gone home for the night, I went back in there with some crystals, Jeff said, and laid them out in the center of the tunnel as offerings to the spirits of place whose realms were patently disturbing with our tunneling equipment. And I went into meditation, and it was about 3 hours before I felt that my offerings were accepted. And that was okay. The work I had to do was done. And so I tucked the crystals down where they're going to be concreted over the following day, right in the center of the tunnel. And from that moment on, we had not a single other injury, accident, breakdown, anything. The rest of the job went sweet. So that's just a little bit of conscious civil engineering, this kind of civil engineering plus, can make such a difference, not just to the accident rate in that tunnel and the degree of happiness you get driving through that tunnel, but also the quality of life for all the people in the houses near that tunnel, who otherwise would have had their earth energies more disturbed by that tunneling equipment.
Love that.
A little snapshot of the kind of geomancy that is going on by individuals all over the place, just with those sensitivities.
And that's just somebody being conscious, not necessarily trained geomancy, just being like, hey, I know crystals, let me go meditate and just be really present with what you're doing, basically.
Yeah. He's a straight civil engineer who happened to have down to his bum and have pagan sensitivities and do festivals as well. But a really good civil engineer.
I love that.
Yeah.
Cool stuff.
Yeah, that's a really cool engineer, isn't it? A pocket full of crystal. I mean, how many engineers have a pocket full of crystals?
Yeah. Yeah. You know the story. There's an old British dowser called Peter Taylor. I think it's Peter Taylor. No. Oh, I can't remember. I might be wrong about the name, but there's an old British dowser who was a NASA scientist whose job it was to calculate the density of moon dust before the first lunar module landing, and in order to decide how big the feet on the module needed to be. I think it was Professor Peter Taylor. And anyway, he had no information whatsoever to go on, so he dowsed for the density of the moon dust and dowsed effectively for the size of the feet of the module. And when the first unmanned landing happened and came home again, they had all the measurements. He'd been spot on.
Cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Richard, just to look at some simple remedies. So for people that have got a sensitivity to this stuff and think, oh wow, yeah, I'd like to give an offering to the fairies or the deities or the spirits of place or the gnomes or whatever their leaning is. What's the simple thing for people, for just the average person that's got a little bit of a inkling into this stuff? What would be a simple little offering, do you think, just to say thank you or something to their nature spirits?
A little bit of food and drink, and traditionally it's food and drink that you put some effort into. So cake and wine rather than raw stuff. And a nice way, just in your garden, is there'll be a tree there somewhere, or a bush or something there that will feel like the place, to just put out offerings to the spirits of the place, just as a gesture of respect and love and peace and desire to work in harmony or healing or whatever might be needed. And the traditional vision is that the spirits imbibe the essence of the offerings of the food and drink, and then the husks might get picked up by a passing dog or child, and that's fine. But just quietly go find a little spot in the garden, and the traditional times of the year. Maybe you might want to do it at the Celtic fire festivals, Lammas or Samhain, which is just coming up, Halloween. It's a very good moment for putting some incense in the fire as offerings to the fire elementals, the spirits of place. Full moons might be a nice moment, or whenever you get the intuition.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
It can be that it ties in with the whole notion of foundation stone laying ceremonies as well. Whenever a new house is being built, most cultures in the world used to, if not still do, have some notion of making offerings of food and drink and maybe crystals or something else, precious, flower petals or whatever, under the foundation stone as an honouring to the elementals whose land is being taken for you to put a building on. And that simple act alone can make such a difference to whether your new conservatory or whether your extension or whether your new home generates stress for you and your neighbours and the elemental spirits of place, or whether there's an easy harmony, a cooperative living between you and the elementals of your garden.
Yeah. Yes, that's really important, isn't it? So what's your chosen piece of equipment for dowsing, Richard?
I use copper L rods. They're about that long. Don't have any quite with me. kind of a rod and then an L shape. A pair of those, I find them very versatile dowsing tools. They'll swing in for yes, for whatever it is I'm looking for. Dowsing is, of course, half phrasing an intelligent left brain question. So if I'm saying to myself, find a distressed underground stream, by implication, I'm saying don't find anything else. Don't find a ley line or a Curry grid or a Hartman grid or a power cable or a band drain or a sewage pipe. I'm just looking for a shallow stream at the moment, and then the rods will cross for that. That's the most basic dowsing. If I'm doing water divining for borehole drilling, then you can adapt the crossing to become a yes for maybe a counting dowsing. So this is one step on from field dowsing, where you walk over the site and your rod swing when you're over the water vane. I then might start counting 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 1, 2. I'm at 92 foot when my rods cross then when I'm counting. That tells me that the water vane is 92 foot down, or what the potential available flow is from that from a borehole somewhere. So they're supremely versatile. Of course, the original vision of a dowsing tool was a forked hazel twig, which is held under sprung tension in your two palms. The notion that's I don't have to demonstrate, but if you imagine you're holding the upper two ends of a Y under a sprung tension, and then the stick poking out in front of you is either going to swing up when you get to water or it's going to swing down when you get to water. Personally, depending on the size of your forked hazel twig, if you go over a strong underground stream, the sprung tension in the one can be so strong that it'll spring up really quickly and either hit you in the head or hit you in the nuts. I prefer the copper L nuts. They're much easier to work with.
Yeah, cool.
So is this something? Is this something anyone can learn? Can anyone pick up these rods and tune into that, or did it take some practice? Is it, say I wanted to learn this,
yeah.
Where would I go? What would I do?
What I did first of all was go to a hedge and cut a hazel twig from the hedge, and then took it down the garden and tried it, having read some books about it first. There'll be all sorts of local dowsing classes, local dowsing groups that generally, certainly there are in Britain and some parts of the States, where you can go along for a weekend or go along for a day or go along for an evening and meet fellow dowsers. And the peer support in going beyond the rational mind into the intuitive mind can be really helpful for some beginners. I've never had a student who couldn't dowse maybe after about 30 minutes of trying. Sometimes you need to get old layers of guilt off their shoulders, or fear, or whatever else. Especially if they've been brought up in a religious tradition of not meddling with the occult, pay the priest to do that instead.
That would be a place.
Yeah, potentially anyone.
Is that some sort of dowsing? That would be a good place to start into geomancy, you would say.
My favourite place to start into dowsing at all is actually dowsing flower remedies, because flower remedies are very safe and you can't really go wrong, and they have a lovely subtle vibration that works very nicely with pendulum dowsing, running a pendulum over a box from flower remedies to see what the right one is for you or your client or your friend. When it comes to geomancy, it's water divining. It's kind of dowsing 101. Walk across a garden and see how many times your rods respond to walking over an underground water vane. Now, you usually find a series of parallel water vanes, depending on the part of the world and the geology, maybe every 2 or 5 yards apart or 20 yards apart. Your rods will cross for the duration of however many paces it takes you to walk across this water vane, and then rods will open again as you're in neutral ground, and then we'll cross again. Start with finding underground water. And then from then you can go on to start exploring other things. Ultimately, you can dowse, it said, for anything you can imagine.
Oh yeah, Richard, what were you dowsing for? You went to do a job the other day when I was with you, didn't you? into a barn to look for a leak?
Oh yeah, there was a farm that had buried its water mains pipe all the way around the circuit, around all the troughs, around a huge cattle barn, dairy barn. And then the floor had been concreted over after the mains had been buried. And they were losing an enormous amount of water, and being water meters still at the moment, the borehole isn't producing very well. They needed to, or they were hoping for a clue as to where to dig through the concrete to start looking for the leaky water pipe. But they probably had best part of 100 yards to dig up. So they asked if I could help identify where the leak was. And found a spot that felt like the only spot where there was water going where it shouldn't be. It felt like it was the trouble spot, and got a very happy phone call that evening saying, "Thank you very much. It saved us 100 yards of jackhammering. We found the leak straight away." So that's a handy skill.
Yeah.
Those sort of skills you find most waterboard, or an awful lot of waterboard workers in this country have those skills and know that they're potentially far more accurate when you get it right than even the modern technology that they can use to help identify where their leaks are. There's a bit of a to-do in some of the waterboards a couple of years ago, where suddenly dowsing got seen as dangerously nutty or pagan and wrong or something. And certainly Southern Water banned all its workers from using it on pain of being sacked. Which the one or two that I spoke to in that period were kind of grumbling quietly, "It's ridiculous, it takes us 10 times as long if we're not allowed to divine for where our water leaks are." So it's a thing that I know that is going on all over the place as part of hydraulic engineering, part of waterboard workers, and the ability to douse water. It's the easiest place to start.
So in the UK, Richard, in the summertime, you run a geomancy intensive camp, don't you?
Yeah. My partner and I run a 6-day intensive camp, teaching as much as we can in a 6-day period of basic geomancy skills. So in that time, we'll start with beginners dowsing and move through to dowsing all the main types of earth energies. So underground water veins, clean and distressed, lays, again, clean and distressed, and also things like global geomagnetic grids like the Curry grid and the Hartmann grid, and geological faults and mountain dragons and various different other types of earth energy. Going through into curative work, so the earth acupuncture, what to do when you find a line that's running with distress in it, and a variety of different curative options. Again, earth acupuncture is my mainstay, working with wooden wands. I like to work with tree spirits as acupuncture needles. But there's a whole range of other styles as well, so we discuss some of them. And then through to the top end, if you like, of precepts for placement of sacred space and design of sacred space. So we open up the realms of metrology and sacred geometry and astronomical alignment, as well as the identification of the sweet earth energies that would be really nice to build a stone circle around, for example.
Phil was saying that you can even put energies into ley lines that will influence political things. I think Phil was talking about that. It's kind of
for me, it's I can't function as a healer if I'm running a political agenda.
Right.
So what I can do is clean up the earth energies to the best of my ability underneath a party conference, or underneath the Houses of Parliament, or underneath the local town hall where the planning committee sits, or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I meant. I wasn't meaning like to create an agenda, but if you're cleaning up the energy, then they're going to make the right decision, you know. So
they're going to make better decisions, exactly.
Yeah.
No, they might even spend time not slagging each other off, but working constructively together from opposite poles of the opinion to create a solution.
Well, I mean, today, this year has been a lot of chaos on the planet. Is this some type of geopathic, astrological stress? Like, what's going on? Is this an evolution that we need to go through? if everything come to the surface? How do you see what's going on this year, 2020?
I've been
Big
most,
question.
a huge question. I've been most aware of the enormous rest that nature has had this year, from far fewer cars on the road and far fewer airplanes in the sky. It's a nice irony, really, that we wouldn't stop our jet travel just for global climate emergency. The chance of catching a nasty flu, and suddenly there's no jumbos in the sky. And I think that's been really a real, quite a lot of people who've turned to walking in nature, turned to being quiet in nature this year because they haven't had all the other entertainments to distract themselves with instead, or to entertain themselves with instead. So there's definitely positives in there.
I think Phil and I have talked a little bit about it. Even though there might be a dark agenda to some of this, there's always a flip side, and I think that, like on the light side, the light's taking advantage. And I think with our intentions, we're going to take advantage of this time. So
no, I think we are. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of people that, with the rise of Zoom this year, really, there's going to be lots of people that aren't going to be commuting into the office every day anymore. There's going to be a lot less international business travel on jets. It's going to be done with Zoom, and this can only be good for the atmospheric environment of our planet, for all the air pollution that we've been chunting out.
It's got to be better for all those unnecessary journeys, hasn't it? Whether they be just down the road or right across the world.
Yeah. I mean, as the cartoon said in the spring, I'm just popping down I'm just popping down the unnecessary shops. Can you think of anything we don't need?
Yeah, that about sums it up, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think we're going to find other. I mean, and I think a lot of people do that because it's been a way of connecting with people. And I think we're going to find other ways to connect in local communities. It's like, go to the shops. That's where you'll see people and you'll connect with people. And I think finding other ways that are not, buying things, So
yeah. That culture is transforming. Of course, it's transforming, and the internet is the most enormous change since the gun, maybe.
Yeah, or the wheel.
Yeah.
That was a big one. The gun was quite a big one.
And,
unsmell thing's quite a big one too. But from a purist geomancy perspective, if you look at the Neolithic flint mine, it hasn't generated geopathic stress. And this is probably linked to the fact that repeatedly you'll find little goddess offerings carved, placed at the bottom of Neolithic flint mines as a kind of give back to the spirits who are placed there. As soon as the Iron Age comes along, people start mining iron to smelt. That's it's those first iron mines is where you first start getting geopathic stress generated in the landscape. That's human inspired.
Right.
So the Iron Age is where the rock set in. The golden age of the Neolithic disappeared, and I remain an optimist. I think we're coming through to a new golden age sometime.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, Richard. Me and Phil, we're both with you on that one. I think we're out the other side of this dip is going to be utopia. That's our motto, isn't it, Phil?
Yep, for sure.
Whatever happens in between times will happen, and the light will shine brightly.
Yeah, we're in big transformation, but the signs are we're going in the right direction. Of course, there's a nasty sting in the tail for the old guard at the moment.
Right.
The ones that are hanging on to the way it was, the techno-industrial complex of what we've experienced in the last century.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's just kind of interesting that the technocracy is a lot of what's driven us into this. But I think what's going to get out of it is returning to the old ways, so returning to the land, returning to the earth, so that it's going to crash, it's not going to work. So
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, in a way that the sign I've seen is people have been finding meaning in their local landscape again, with not being able to go to the cinema or the movies or the sporting occasion, to just go for the walks in the wild bits of country. It's the only place they're been allowed to walk this year.
Yeah.
So there's a shift in where people are finding meaning.
So Richard, back to your course as well. So I just want to pump that a little bit. You also cover electromagnetic stress and electromagnetic smog in there, don't you? And you look at things like what direction to place your bed in. Just simple. There's also simple things you talk about, isn't there? And I know Julie runs a class on. She does space clearing, doesn't she? And talks about remedies and herbal brews and sage and um, there's a whole set on sacred space clearing, doesn't she?
Yeah, yeah, that's one of Julie's specialisms, is the space clearing and the working with incenses. Um, Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, so there's several other layers of stuff that I haven't mentioned that, of course, we cover, because in the end, geomancy broadly is the same as environmental medicine to a large extent. So we look at the health relationships of particular stuff like electromagnetics and microwaves and mobile phones and 4 and 5G masts and the impact they have on health. Because you can't be really a contemporary geomancer or be working in environmental medicine in contemporary times without being aware of the huge potential dangers from sitting next to the photocopier or having a clock radio wire right beside your metal bed frame where you sleep, or stuff like that can be, or metal bed springs for that matter. Some of those practical, down-to-earth interior design stuff that's so important for health, let alone going into the realms of the enormously high rates of stomach cancer linked with using food cooked in microwave ovens. Yeah, so
So
all those realms. We do touch on the nation of electrosmog and some of the things one can do to avoid them. What gets really nasty is where you've got an underground water vein running under the local electrical substation out in the street, where you get that strong electrosmog component transmitted through the information field from underground water vein to your child's bed. That seems to be a recurring theme. Lymphomas and leukemias coming up.
wow. So how many days is your course, Richard, that you do in England?
Sorry, missed that. Say again.
How many days does your course run for?
Right, it runs for 6 days, usually the second week of July. We run a course, and we have students come over from all over the world. We encourage them to camp on site with us for the week, and we work fairly intensively, kind of 9 in the morning till 9 at night usually, and generate an energy that allows people to grow in a safe space for the week, grow and learn. We always really enjoy the class.
I've had the privilege, Phil, to work with Richard on some of these classes, so it's I know it's a brilliant course. I know it's brilliant because of and also I've been involved with doing the catering for the class as well, and it's really interesting how it affects us when we're not involved with the teaching, but we're doing the food. And I might say to Jules, "What have you been doing this afternoon?" And I know one day, Kay had been feeling all this stuff was coming up, and she'd been feeling all these spirits. So I said, "Jules, what have you been teaching today?" And she said, "Oh, we've just been opening up to the realm of spirit and ghosts and entities and stuff." And I was like, "Oh," and then. So that night, because Kay's really sensitive, they played havoc with her, and then the next day, it's all about closing it all down and cleaning it all up and sorting it all out. And Kay had a really sweet day. So even though she wasn't in the classes, she was on the site, and she went through. If you're working on site like we have been on several of the classes,
you definitely partake of the process.
Yeah, it's a really intense process, and You know, I know from teaching on a course, doing the catering for the course, and talking to the students, you know, the amazing benefit that they've had from Richard and Julie's immense experience, talent, and knowledge. They share it. You know, they both teach in a completely different way. However, they're brilliant. You know, it's fun, it's interesting, it's intense, it's challenging, it's enlightening, and you know, at the end, the students, they just love it, and they don't want to go home, and they, you know, and they keep in touch with each other, and they've got a really nice active community on Facebook, and I know they've got a smaller community on Instagram where people share jobs they've done, insights they've learned, interactions they've had, you know, things that they've come up with, drums, rattles, whatever, you know, they share it on there, and they ask questions. So Richard and Jules do a brilliant job. It's a brilliant course.
Yeah, well, thank you for the plug, Phil. Very much part of where Jules and I came from was we met studying feng shui together lots of years ago, and there's in that tradition there's lots of kind of different lineage, one-upmanship, and secrets that are held, secrets that your master will only divulge if you are fit in 30 years' time, and kind of holding secrets for commercial advantage potentially, and kind of tied up with the business model. We both had weren't comfortable with that, and we felt that it's really time for this knowledge to be up and out there. You know, how many sicknesses, how many deaths, how many marriages could be saved if people just knew a little bit about having negative earth energies and what they can do to fix it, and let alone call on their local national dowsing register for someone who can come out and help them with it. Yeah, so we try to get it up out there. So our website, landandspirit.net, has got lots of different articles, different aspects about geomancy gone all out there. Even a pro version of how to do earth acupuncture for people that have got some training already in healing or dowsing or both. Yeah, so we try to get the knowledge out there.
I'm just putting the link in our chat now. Then Phil's got it as well if he wants to put it on. Oh, it's not a capital L; it's a little one.
So yeah, so is there like a few simple things that people could do, you know, today, maybe before they go on a course? Like what sort of changes could somebody make to maybe enhance their space naturally? What would you say some basic things that people could do?
Well, the first thing I'd say is go to an article that Jules has just put up on our website last year of I think it's 7 basic essentials that anyone can do.
Okay.
She wrote the article. So that's my best answer. She wrote a brilliant article about it. Go and have a look at that. Stuff like get rid of metal mattresses in your bed, the metal springs in your mattresses, in your bed frames, get rid of metal bed bases. That's something that's going to help anyone, whatever. Go to decent mattress, whether that's organic latex and cotton and wool, or whether it's a simple foam pad rather than the metal springs. Because wherever you've got metal that generates a little DC field standing wave that upsets our own biomagnetic fields. So you run a geomagnetometer over a sprung mattress, and you get all sorts of peaks and troughs that can be related to errant endocrine and immune behavior, particularly. That's a really standard place to start that everyone can go.
So what was the title of the article, Richard? I'm just going to write it in the chat box.
Yeah. Here she is now. Jules, what was the title of your article on 7 simple things you can do for feng shui? To feng shui your home.
Something like that.
I've just referenced your webpage on that article. Do you remember its title?
No.
Okay.
I'm just going to put down.
Is it the 5 key areas to improve subtle energy in your home?
That's the one. That's the one. Well done.
I got it. Yeah, I can share that link.
Yep.
Yep, you've got the website as well. Well done.
Cool.
Cool.
Well, Richard, that's been brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yeah. go there. That's my best answer to that one.
Yeah, Phil's just put the link on here, and then we can put it on our Facebook page as well. So,
Oh, great.
is there anything you'd like to add now, Richard? You think we're done?
What is there to add? I suppose one thing I could add as far as our course next year is concerned is that I've been speaking tonight from my specialisms, my favourite areas of geomancy. Jules has got a whole bunch of other skills, equally if not more impressive to mine, in the realms of geomancy.
We'll have to get Jules. We'll have to get Jules on the show then.
I think so. I think so. Yeah. There are lots of other geomancers around doing good work, who work in different ways, work in different styles, but they all seem to come from ultimately a very similar intent, which is to harness that old shamanic model of access heaven, access earth, become an aligned intermediary between the two in order to facilitate healing to happen. Whether that's the healing on the cultural scale of siting a new sacred space for the benefit of all the earth energies in that area and everyone living there, and all the mammalian life there as well, through to a specific individual house that needs a bit of help in cleaning up the one bed in that bedroom, the one bed in the only corner of the bedroom you can put a bed in, where everyone who ever sleeps there gets cancer. The other extreme.
Yeah.
That's what geomancy is about.
Yeah, that's the thing in England, isn't it? Quite often you can't move the bed because the rooms are built in such a way that there's only one place for the bed to go, and it's normally not the best way.
Yeah, exactly. And although there is an older tradition that it's best to sleep on stable ground rather than over an underground water vein, the reality is underground water veins are everywhere, and most people don't have the option of where to move the bed to.
Yeah.
And the best thing we can do is do curative earth acupuncture to make sure that at least the information field we're bathing in every night as we sleep and restore and regenerate is sweet, nourishing earth energy rather than stuff that's frying us further.
Yeah.
Great. It's a really good show. Really fun.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for inviting me to your show, Phil and Phil.
A pleasure, Richard. Pleasure. So this is Richard Cratemore, the legend of Richard Cratemore, the dowser and geomancer, water dowser, and a great friend of mine. So I really appreciate you, Richard. Thank you so much for spending the time and sharing with us tonight. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, brilliant.
My pleasure. Thank you, Phil. Nice to talk with you.
So I'm Phil.
And I'm Phil.
And you've been joining us on the Phil and Phil show, and we appreciate everybody out there joining us. You can check us out, philandphil.com, and then on all social media channels, we'll share this video tonight, and then the links to Richard's website and gathering any more information. Anything else you want to add, Phil, before we close?
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, everyone watching. If you love our show and you'd like to donate, please go to our website, philandphil.com, where you will find a little donate button. Every little helps to keep us going. At the moment, we do all this for free because we love it, and we just want to share brilliant people like Richard. We just want to share their knowledge and their inspiration with the world so you guys can learn and we can create the utopia.
Great. All right. Well, good night. Thank you, everybody.
Good night. Thanks for watching. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Phil.
Good night.